Good morning. Good morning. Um, we're so excited about the panel today. Madeline Hammond and I started this 23 years ago, and it's become such an important part of what we do. Speaking of Madeline Hammond, I'm going to put her on the spot. I mentioned she's worked 23 years behind this panel, and her husband have made such an incredible mark in this festival that this 2 days ago, the award that we gave to Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody got renamed on their behalf. So from now on, is the Cinema Vanguard Award will be known as the Hammond Award to celebrate Madeline and Pete. Um, so please give a warm welcome to the amazing ladies in this panel. Paula Dupre Pressman, producer, Porcelain War. Victoria Warmerdam, director, writer, I'm Not a Robot. The incredible Diane Warren, songwriter, the 6888. Smriti Mundra, director, I Am Ready, Warden. Emily Cassie, director, Sugarcane. And Sushitra Matai, producer, Anuja. Please give a warm welcome to moderator for 23 years of the women's panel, Madeline Hammond, head of Madeline Hammond and Associates.
So welcome. Thanks for getting up early on a Saturday morning and joining us for, in fact, I didn't even realize it was 23 years until Roger told me. That's insane. But I'm thrilled to be back and happy to see all of you guys. You were like a little kid when you started. I was. As Diane said, I was a very small child when I first started. That's it. I was in high school, Diane. Yeah, I was high school. All right, so here we go. You're in for a treat because we've got a hell of a panel today. I'm going to do some very brief intros, starting with Suchitra Matai to my left. She's a producer and an artist, Oscar nominated for Best Live Action Short, Anuja. Her artistic work celebrates the power of women, including exploring her own family's history of indentured labor. That's heavy. Her work has been seen in the National Museum of Women in the Arts in DC, as well as museums in San Francisco, Tampa, Denver, New York, San Diego, Bentonville, Arkansas, and many, many more. Emily Cassie. She's a director, producer, and cinematographer, Oscar nominated for Best Documentary Feature Sugarcane. She's been, yes, feel free to clap. You guys can clap it, anything you want. Because as women, we're used to being interrupted and we just pick right back up. So it doesn't affect us at all. You just go for it. She's been nominated for an Emmy and a Peabody. She shoots, directs, and reports stories on geopolitical conflict, humanitarian crises, drug and weapons trafficking in the Sahara Desert, and immigration detention in the United States. So you're going to be very busy, sadly. Her work has been honored with multiple Edward R. Murrow, World Press Photo, and National Press Photographer Awards. Next is Smitri Moonmort. I'm going to do this. I've been practicing this. Sumitri Mundra. Did I do it? All right. I like to be sure I pronounce names correctly, especially for these amazing people. You deserve that. She's a director, Oscar nominated for Best Doc Short, I Am Ready, Warden. She's been nominated previously for an Academy Award for her doc short called St. Louis Superman, which we loved. And she's been nominated for an Emmy for the Netflix show Indian Matchmaking, now in its third season. Should we clap for Indian Matchmaking? Oh my gosh, what to say about Diane Warren? She's a three-time panelist. You've been with 3 times with us.
Really?
Yeah, we love her so much. We just keep asking her back. Even if she doesn't have anything, we're going to have her come back. But this year she does. She has been she's been nominated for an original song called "The Journey," performed by her from Netflix's The 6888, directed by Tyler Perry. I think it goes without saying, Diane is one of the most acclaimed songwriters in our time. She's a 16-time nominee uh, and won.
No, how many times have I won?
Well, I was about to say, she said, how many times has she won? She's won once. She won an honorary Oscar 3 years ago.
I
And
didn't win one. That was an honorary Oscar. That's really
to me,
cool.
an Oscar is an Oscar. Honorary, yeah. Is it gold? Does it look like the other Oscar?
Yes.
All right.
Does he want a friend?
And you have it on your piano?
Kinda.
Kind of? Okay. So, as far as I'm concerned, she's an Oscar winner. And she's worked with every name in the business from Snoop Dogg, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber. I can't even go through and we'd be here all day. But she's very lucky and beloved. As if that's not enough, she actually has a documentary that was done about her called Relentless. And for those of you that may know anything about Diane, that's about the perfect title I've ever heard, Relentless. You can, it's in theaters. It's streaming on Masterclass, and so if you have time, check it out. It's quite remarkable.
I don't want to waste an hour now.
No, it's not a waste. Next is Victoria Warmerdam. She's a director and a writer, Oscar nominated for Best Live Action Short, I'm Not a Robot. Her previous short films, Short Calf Muscle and Snorri, have screened at over 150 festivals around the world. And last is my friend and longtime friend, Paula Dupre Pessman. She's a producer and writer, Oscar nominated for Porcelain War. She's won an Emmy and a Grammy. Some of her credits include The Cove, Chasing Ice, Keep on Keeping On, and Quincy, about the late, great Quincy Jones, where she got her Grammy. And a little bit of trivia about Paula. Earlier in her career, she was part of the producing team for the Harry Potter films. Well, there you go. All right. Okay, so now we've got our intros. You see the amazing panelists. We're going to show the clips at the end. So we're going to just do a deep dive and start asking some questions in no particular order. I'm going to start with Suchitra. So you think I'm going to go in order, but I'm not. All right, Suchitra, talk to us about Anuja. Tell us about the short, how it came about, and just a little bit about it for those that may not have seen it.
Of course. So it's about two sisters who work in a garment factory in Delhi, and it sheds light on child labor, but it also is really about the bond between sisters and the love between sisters as well.
So you had mentioned that about child labor. When I was working on this, I saw this alarming statistic that said nearly 1 in 10 children under the age of 16 is subject to child labor. That's like 160 million children around the world. It is astounding.
It's absurd. It's almost half the population of the U.S. And yet stories of these children aren't always shared, and their lives, centering their lives in terms of just storytelling isn't always is done. So we saw a kind of need for that.
And one of the things when you see the short that I think you'll be so impressed with, as I, not just the casting, which I'd like you to talk about as well, but also the fact that even though it's about something terrible, there's so much humor and love and warmth in it that it isn't I love that you didn't make a typical straight, isn't this terrible type of thing. You really, it's just a story of these two incredible sisters. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think the way we saw it, Adam, the writer and director, and my husband partner, was thinking about writing a coming of age story, and we had come across this statistic. I mean, in my practice, I'm an artist, a visual artist, and as you mentioned, I center women, and I tell stories of people whose stories haven't been shared. Right, really, kind of capturing and archiving these experiences, and so it felt like a kind of natural extension, and also a context that just we felt was just right, and so for telling these stories. So I think you asked me how it came about. Yeah.
Well, and the casting of the two sisters.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when we set out to cast, I should say that this is really our kind of first movie. Adam is a philosophy professor, and I'm an artist, as I mentioned. We made a film in our living room during the pandemic, and Adam won't like this, but it wasn't as good. And Anuja is our really first, straight short, and
And nominated.
yeah,
Okay,
nominated.
that's pretty amazing.
So we're pretty stoked. But thank you, thank you. In terms of the casting, when we set out to cast, we've done all this research. So when we found the statistic, we started researching and unearthing all this material. And my own family, as you mentioned, comes from a history of of indentured labor through British colonial rule, and so it's something that has always been really kind of deep in our family history. And so we thought we would cast from the community. And so we went to India, we visited a lot of nonprofits that support children. And particularly, we found that the Salam Balak Trust in Delhi was an amazing fit for us because they have a robust theater program. And so, one of the things we had thought about, and I don't want to go on and on here, but one of the things we had thought about was that Adam, I knew that he wanted to have this sense of play and intuition within the acting and the actors. And the way we thought, especially with child actors, to kind of do this would be to kind of cast within the community and have this sense of like authenticity and to provide roles for children in these communities. So the main character, Anuja, is actually she. Was living on the streets just about a year and a half, well, 2 years ago. Actually, we've actually been working on this for several years, so maybe 3.5 years
She
ago.
was like living on the street, so she was but she had never acted.
Well, no, that is not true. She had more experience than we did. She had actually been cast in a minor role in a feature film called The Braid, made by a French director. And I think she was playing at the Salam Balak Trust, and they realized her potential as an actress. And then when she came, when she worked with us, she had a bit of experience. Yeah.
Since you mentioned Adam, and by the way, we should clap for Adam. Adam Graves, the director of the short, is here today. And we love that you're here supporting. How was that? How'd you balance the home life, the work life? Dinner conversations always about the short?
We've been collaborating for over 25 years, and he helps with my artwork, and we talk philosophy, we talk all sorts of things. But this was really a family affair. Our children, teenagers, are co-producers, and they really got in on it as well. We were joking about how they had creative input, right, with the story and everything, but they also gave us business input because we're kind of flighty artists, philosophers, and they're a lot more level headed. So basically, very much a family affair. Is it is it uh, challenging at times? Yes,
I
because
bet.
it's hard to escape it, right? But it's also been such a beautiful and very dramatic experience. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I think that's great. And then last question for you is I was amazed at how many great producers um, are on this short. And one of them is Mindy Kaling and Priyanka Chopra, both women very active and supporting and telling stories about women of color. And so can you talk to us a little bit about Mindy, Priyanka, but especially Mindy, because I think without her help, this might not have gotten to the place that it did.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we, spent so much time, Adam, perfecting this film, and Um, Mindy had actually approached me a couple of years ago about collecting work of mine because she's an art collector, and so we had kind of sort of, been in dialogue. And so when Adam finished when the film was finished, I reached out to her and she watched it, and the next morning she said she really wanted to come on board and that it was a beautiful film. So we've had this kind of just really unbelievable experience where just supporters have come on board, and the girls have been centered, and it's been amazing, really.
And and I think it is amazing that Mindy helped get it onto Netflix.
Yes, so Mindy's role has been, she's really dug in deep.
She
It's
does.
she hasn't just, lent her name. She has worked so hard um, to help the
Yeah.
film, and, to just
So to get global
make it.
distribution like that is amazing.
Yeah,
And you're
it's
right.
crazy.
I don't know that this will ever happen again, but enjoy it while it is because it's pretty extraordinary.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Paula, tell us a little bit, if you could, about Porcelain War and how you got attached. I know I fooled you, right? You thought I was going down the road.
I was like, I'm just going to enjoy this.
I know
This
you
is
did.
amazing.
I saw. No. Anyway, please tell us about one of my favorite films this season, Porcelain War, and how you got attached.
I I feel very, very fortunate that this film found me. The co-directors, so we have a couple in Los Angeles that were visual effects supervisor and producer, and artists in Ukraine, a married couple that are 9 miles from the fighting line, and their best friend Andre, who's the cinematographer, also in Kharkiv. And they were working on an animated project together, and then the war broke out. So Brendan called to check on them and said, "When are you leaving?" And Slava said, "We're not leaving, and we're staying, and we're still making our art at night." So he said, "What are you doing during the day?" And he found out that Slava, the co-director and artist, was training civilians how to fight and protect themselves during the day, and also had joined the special forces. And then at night, as a form of resistance, they continued, when they had power, to make their porcelain art and continue to put beauty in the world. None of them had made a film before, so I was introduced to them by a mutual friend because they were just trying to figure out, what do we do here? And I saw some photos of what they were doing, and I realized this is so different than anything I'd ever seen. It's not photos, and it's not like news. It's not war like you would see it. It's really the human side and the beauty. And I got on Zoom with them and learned that their whole focus was to film beauty and everything around them that's worth fighting for and preserving: culture, art, humanity, nature, the environment. And it just stole my heart. I was all in. So started secretly raising donations and money to make the film so that we could keep their locations safe. And it just grew. Like, we literally smuggled in cameras through Poland and taught them over Zoom how to use them. And
Can you
literally, it was like, turn it on here. But they use these as another form of art.
tell us about smuggling them in, how you got them in?
Oh, starts with a makeup artist. So there was a makeup artist in New Jersey, and she's amazing. She's a volunteer, and she takes like 50 to 60 bags, these huge duffel bags, in 3 vehicles. She gets them to the airport and takes them through Poland into Ukraine and gets them all the way to the far, far east side of Ukraine where they are. And in there, there was,
What's in them?
yeah, I mean, crazy things. There's clothing, there's underwear, there's long underwear, boots, there's equipment needed to protect themselves. There's also a lot of policemen policemen donate their bulletproof vests. So those are going to them, as well as cameras and sound equipment and hard drives and scanners and everything. We ended up sending 15 cameras and teaching Slava's whole unit how to use GoPros and body cams and drone cameras. So it was a very different kind of project. They would upload footage to us when there was power. We had a lot of air raids, a lot of power outages, and a lot of concern for them every day. Their city's being bombed every day still. So there was many days when we couldn't reach them, and we're very worried about them. And then they'd pop back on and say, "We're here. We're still fighting. We've got it." And the first time, they didn't speak any English through the making of the film, so we had a translator. We had 10 translators to translate the footage. And by the time we met, it was in Sundance when they got off the plane. It was the first time we met in person. And it was amazing to touch them. We're like, they're 3D. I just had so much love for them in the process, but then to actually get them, which was a major deal. And they brought their dog, Frodo, who's also in the film, and they wouldn't come without him. So trying to get a dog out of Ukraine in an EU crossing country, it was a lot. Frodo was probably the hardest thing to get out of Ukraine.
But I've seen Frodo on the red carpets, and I think Frodo's enjoying this whole season quite a lot. Am I right?
Yeah, Anya always said Frodo is not so social. He likes to just stay in the closet while we make art. Frodo is very social. Frodo, if we were doing a panel right now and he heard his name, he would be perking up. Like, is it ready? Is it my time? He loves people. Interestingly, he really is still very protective. If we're out and he hears a plane or a helicopter, he'll chase it away. And he actually eats better when there's that kind of protection going on. So we've found different hotels in New York and LA where near the airports or helicopter landings.
Wow.
And Frodo will eat so good because he's just busy chasing those helicopters away. But it's trauma, like it's trauma. These people, as resilient as they are and beautiful and wanting to show beauty, it's trauma,
It is.
for Frodo and the people.
But I love how Frodo's on call
Oh,
24/7.
always.
Always.
Always. He's so brave.
You put together an all female crew. Tell us about that. Or did you just pick the best people around, or was that
I
intentional?
think best people, female producers are all one. Yeah, we are so fortunate. Through my years of working in film, knew right away who to reach out to, and we have 4 female producers. And I think we all have different skill sets, and we all brought different things to the project, and we worked around the clock. We didn't have a lot of time. We had our team in Ukraine, our post was in Australia. Editing was in LA. I'm in Colorado. And, we just had like open Zooms just around the clock to get the film done and get it out. And, women get it done. They're really amazing.
Damn sure. That's right. Okay, Miss Emily Cassie. Tell us a little bit about Sugarcane, if you could.
So, Sugarcane follows an investigation, a search at an Indian residential school in British Columbia. These were schools that, for over 150 years in both Canada and the United States, forcibly separated Indigenous kids from their families and put them into assimilationist schools to, in the words of one of its founders, kill the Indian, save the man. They were horrifically abused at these schools, not allowed to speak their language, and many of them sexually abused by the clergy, many of them from the Catholic Church who ran these schools. And the film follows several characters, survivors, as they try to not only excavate truths below the ground, but in the recesses of their own memories.
Do you think that a documentary like this and gaining the trust of the subjects in it helped a little bit with the healing? And tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the film came together in a sort of faded way. And so maybe I'll start there because it tells you a little bit about why this film was so meaningful to so many people. My background is that I grew up in a community of Holocaust survivors and their descendants, and my mom was also a social worker working in hospitals with survivors. And so I had this kind of view of the world and questions of why we exact violence on one another, how we survive, what we do in the aftermath, and how silences can permeate our family trees generation after generation. And so I spent a decade as an investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker working for newsrooms like the New York Times and PBS NewsHour, trying to answer these questions everywhere in the world, from Afghanistan to Rwanda to the Saharan Desert. But I had never thought to look at my own country in my own backyard. Born and raised in Toronto, and the last residential school closed in 1997, which was my first year of kindergarten. And so
Not
when
that long
news,
ago.
not long ago at all, and so when news broke out of May of 2021 about potential unmarked graves on the grounds of one of those schools, which you all might remember when that news broke, I felt gut pulled to the story. And the thing I felt compelled to do in that moment was reach out to an old friend of mine, a guy named Julian Brave Noise Cat. Julian and I were randomly assigned the desks next to each other at our first reporting jobs, cub reporters in a New York newsroom. And he had gone on to become one of the most foremost thinkers and writers and journalists focusing on Indigenous life in North America. So I called him up and asked if he wanted to work on something on the subject. And while he thought about it, I went looking for a nation that said they were going to do a search. And I found this article in the Williams Lake Tribune about Chief Willie Sellers and a school called St. Joseph's Mission. I sent him a cold email that day. Chief Sellers called me back that same afternoon and he said, "The Creator has always had great timing. Just yesterday, our council said we need someone to document our search."
Wow.
So I got my gear together. Yeah,
Really, that's
it was
amazing.
wild. Yes.
Talk about fated.
Yeah, and these are communities who have no reason to trust an outsider, right? So it was really remarkable and I got my gear together and I was about to head to Williams like 2 weeks later and that's when I heard back from Julian. He called me and said he'd be open to directing a project with me on the residential schools and that's when I told him I was going to follow a search and that search was at St. Joseph's Mission. Well, Julian went silent and he said, "That's crazy. That's the school my family attended and where I heard a rumor that my father was born, and that's all I've ever known." So, out of 139 schools in Canada and 417 in the United States, I happened to choose to follow a search at the one school where Julian's family attended and where we would later find out his father's life began, where he was found in the school's incinerator.
Wow. That is quite amazing. So, so getting back to the healing, did Julian and his dad through this process, and let me also ask, how did you gain? I know you knew Julian, but you also had to gain the trust of the whole family, I'm sure. So tell us about
right.
that, and then the healing that might have occurred.
Well, as you can imagine, because of what we had discovered, Julian and his dad ended up deciding to go on this road trip to find out the truth concurrently at the same time that we were following the investigation of the abuse that happened at the rest of the schools. And what we discovered was not about unmarked graves, but about a pattern of infanticide at St. Joseph's Mission, the first to ever be uncovered at one of these schools. And though there were really painful moments, there's a man in the film, Rick Gilbert, who is carrying a secret in his own DNA that he was the son of a priest at the school. He goes all the way to the Vatican. I had to sneak into the Vatican and skirt the Vatican guard to film this scene.
Good for you.
Thank you. We're going to be calling my memoir "A Jew in the Vatican." We'll see how that goes. Um, but, what was so extraordinary about this journey was that Julian and his father were able to overcome generations of pain and find their way back to love. This isn't just a story of trauma. It's a story about reclamation. It's a story about rebuilding and taking back what was attempted to be destroyed, right? This was a system where this is the genocide that happened in this country. This is the origin story of North America, and the intent was to destroy a people. And this film is a refutation of that. And Julian and his family were able to find immense healing, and so have communities across North America who have seen the film and are finally starting to speak for the first time about what happened to them.
Which is remarkable. Yeah. So you mentioned that that this film has been going around the country. A res tour is what it was referred to. So how is it when you show this to other communities, and what has their response been?
Yeah, our goal was nothing short of correcting the record and rewriting history and holding institutions to account. And we were able to bring the film to the White House. We were able to bring the film to Canadian Parliament. We were part of the reason Joe Biden apologized for the schools. And so there was real recognition there. But the most meaningful part of all of this was getting to bring it to Indian country. We went everywhere from Sitka, Alaska to Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories to Standing Rock in the Dakotas. And there we saw multiple generations of families, grandparents with their grandkids and their kids watching the film together. And then afterwards, people would come up to us and say, I drove 5 hours here with my dad, and he's finally been able to tell me for the first time what happened to him. There was a woman crying in the bathroom one day who said, I feel like I can finally forgive my parents
Right.
for how they treated me because I can now understand them.
Yeah.
And so a movement has begun. And in a very dark time for our country, when we move towards autocracy, if we want to understand the roots of that, look no further than Indigenous communities who suffered under autocracy for the majority of their time in this country. And this moment of reclamation and resistance has been a profound one. And I think we just feel so honored that sugarcane is a part of that.
Incredible. I love it. And through that doc, you got people to open up and talk about something that they didn't, intergenerational trauma. All right. Well, next we are going to talk to Diane Warren. Yeah. Yes, we are. And Diane, her song "The Journey" is from a fabulous film that Tyler Perry directed called "The 688." Diane, do you want to take a stab at talking about the film a little bit, and then how you came into how the project found you?
It's the true story about the 688 Battalion, African American women in World War II, that their job was to get the mail to the front lines, and no one thought they could do it. And they faced every obstacle and every fucked up situation that was thrown in front of them, and racism, everything. And they completed their task in record time, and they were amazing women, led by Charity Adams. I found my way to this movie because my friend Carrie Seelig, I was one of the producers, and she told me about the movie. And at the time, she wasn't able to give me a script. She showed me a sizzle reel of the real women. I was like, fuck, man. How has this story not been told? And then she walked me through the scenes, scene by scene. So I've never written a song for a movie that way. I usually read a script or I see something in kind of rough form, but I saw it in my mind. And next day I sat at my keyboard and just started playing those chords.
Just from a sizzle reel?
Huh?
From the
sizzle reel, and from her telling me, walking me through what this movie was. Really, I saw it in my head. And I started playing those chords, and the chorus, right then wrote itself, the journey. It's the getting there to where you're going through. Go through hell, but still you're going to make it through. All that came in one thing. That doesn't usually happen. I mean, then I had to write the rest of the song, but I knew I had chills all over, and I had tears in my eyes, and those are the good ones. I'm like, I know this could be one of the best songs I ever wrote in my life, and I think it is.
I've known you for, I think it is too.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've known you for so long. You're so self-deprecating. I love how she just says, and then I just wrote blah, 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 blah. These words that she just mumbled over are some of the most poignant, amazing words.
Thank you.
And by the way, just to add a little bit to what Diane was saying about the story, it was 17 million pieces of mail that had been stored for years.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, back then there were no phones, right? World War II. This was the only means of communication. So morale was at an all-time low because nobody knew if their loved ones were alive or dead. There was no mail going either way. Right. So what Charity and her battalion was quite extraordinary.
By the way, Kerry Washington, she should have been up for an Academy Award for this.
Yeah. She played Major Charity Adams. And similar to what Emily was telling us about sugarcane, 6888 also was fated in that Tyler was trying to figure out who should play Charity, and it just so happened that Carrie was dressed up in a World War II outfit and posted it, and then Tyler saw it, and he's like, that's our Charity.
See, all this stuff is meant to be. Everything with this song in this movie is all, and even her who sings my song, Gabby Wilson's her name, we met when she was 14. She was a kid, and she was already just an amazing artist at that age. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out when we started working together. But then we reconnected at the weird COVID Oscars you know. um, and she beat me, bitch. No, I'm just kidding, kind of. No, I am, I am kidding. I am. Anyways, but then we reconnected. She reached out. I had just written The Journey. This is how weird things that when they're meant to be, they happen. I had just written it, and she reached out to me and said, "I think it's time for us to work together." I go, well, come on over to my studio because I have something that you really have to hear. And literally, she came over. I can't remember if it was the next day or the day after, but it was like right after. And she came over, and I played the song on the piano, and she was so moved by it. She goes, "I'm doing this song today." So she came in around 12, and by about 4 o'clock, she had done the piano, done the guitars, and sang to me one of the best vocals I've ever heard in my entire life. And I've worked with the best. And it's her vocal is as good as anybody.
Because it was her
It's a
song.
master class.
She made it. Yeah.
She made it. So I feel like such a part of this song. And yeah, and then she went back to New York and produced the record. And
So great.
I'm so proud of it. And I said, you're going to hate me because you're going to be singing this song when you're 80.
That's right. Well,
I'm
that's
going to
good.
love you.
So Diane, when you were so just a little bit more about your process. So when you wrote it,
You know, I love talking about my process from the documentary, right?
I do. So you didn't have her in mind.
No,
You-
I wrote. I just try. When I do a song for a movie, I just try to write the best song I can write, and then I'm a casting director, finding the authentic. The artist has to be authentic to the song and authentic to the movie, and that's why when Gabby reached out to me, it's like, Gabby could have been in this movie. She
Yeah,
could have
she
been,
could've.
one
Yeah.
of those women.
Of course.
She's a badass.
Yeah.
So it just kind of like I didn't know, when I was writing who was going to do it, but you know what, the universe brought the right artist to me.
Glad you took that call.
Yeah, it was on Instagram, it was a DM actually.
Wow.
I'm glad I looked.
That's amazing. Well, so you've won an Oscar, a Grammy, an Emmy.
Okay, so I got
Yes.
I'm not downplaying the honorary Oscar because it's the hardest one to get, and I do have that. But he's really lonely.
He is
And
lonely.
He wants
Needs a
and he
friend?
wants and he wants a friend. He wants a boyfriend, even though I'm not sure if he's a boy.
Oh, yeah. He is kind of could be anything.
Yeah, he could be whatever he wants to
So
be.
he wants another anything.
Yeah, he wants a friend.
He wants a friend.
He
Okay.
does.
Well, since you have won all these awards and you've been to every award show, I have a two-part question.
Okay.
One is, do you like dressing up? You like going through all that? You like getting in the car, going on the carpet, doing the whole thing? And do you have a favorite show?
I love the Oscars, by the way. I love the whole thing. I love award season. I really have fun with it, honestly. Oscars are great. I wish the songs were on this year, but they're not. But but that's usually my favorite part of the Oscars, seeing my song performed on there. But
But they
you know
have they
my
said for
favorite.
sure that they're not going to be?
It doesn't look like it at the moment.
Okay.
But that's usually
That's
yeah,
too bad. They're
don't you
trying
guys
to
want
do
to
it
hear
to
the
save
music
fun.
on there?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I mean,
I
whatever.
still have hope they're going to change their mind.
I
No.
would hope, but I don't know. But
Well, since all the other women are first-time nominees, and you're a veteran,
I'm
what-
a 16. This is my 16th.
So what advice would
nomination.
you have for them? Like
Well,
snacks?
Don't expect to win. But just be okay. It's the coolest fucking thing to be nominated. It really is. And I'm not being like, I'm not joking. It's serious. It's a big deal. They only pick 5 of us in every category. And there's, I mean, how many documentaries are out a year? Like hundreds, right? Okay, same
Like
with songs.
180, and they choose 5.
And the same with songs. There's over 100 and like 5, and you hear your song or your movie named in the morning. You guys were jumping up and down, weren't you? I
Everybody
was.
jumped up and
It's
down.
my 16th time. I'm still fucking jumping up and down because it's cool as shit.
So Diane,
Okay. And you
It
guys
is
should
cool.
all applaud yourself for being up on the stage because you're all Oscar
you should.
nominated.
Oscar nominated.
Okay. Whatever happens.
And you know that whenever they write about you from here on, it's always going to be Oscar nominated, whether you win or not. That's now part of your name.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Be cooler to have Oscar winning.
And Diane's is always like, 16 and whatever time nominated.
It's cool.
Yeah. All right, Victoria Warmerdam. Victoria did I Am Not a Robot, Excuse me.
Are you a robot?
Maybe.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, Diane, because when you watch the short, you do wonder about this, and it's fascinating. So, first, I want you to tell a little bit about it, and then we're going to do a few questions.
Yeah, it's this short film. It's a 22-minute short about this woman who tries to get through those captchas. I think everyone here is familiar with those annoying things where you have to prove that you're not a robot by clicking bikes or traffic lights, all that stuff. And she can solve them and starts to wonder if she actually might be a robot.
Well, actually, if I may, so those little boxes, by the way, you're right. It's always like a stoplight, a bus. I think it should be like kittens and
Yes.
something a little better because it's,
Yes.
yeah, you're like, well, I don't know. I guess it's a bus. Looks like a bus, but it's hard to tell. I might be a robot.
Kittens would be better.
What?
Kittens would be better.
Kittens would be way better. All right, I'm going to put that. Maybe you can do something about that. But I just have to go back to the annoying box and how it's used so much and the origin of this. So CAPTCHA is stands, so it's CAPTCHA. We've all seen it. And it actually stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart. Isn't that crazy? How's that for an acronym? So then, as I'm looking this up, I'm like, well, what's a Turing test? Turing. And then I remembered Alan Turing from The Imitation Game, which, if you haven't seen that film, check it out. Benedict Cumberbatch played him, and he was this incredible mathematician in the 1950s. So here we are over 60 years later. And this Turing test is now annoying us every time we want to go buy, anything on Amazon. So, with that in mind, when this idea came to you, are you like, oh, this will make a hell of a short?
Yeah, well, it all started like literally like that, me not getting through those captchas. And, my mind sort of went there and like, oh, what if I'm actually a robot? And what if I'm purchased by my partner, therefore? And I was so intrigued by that question. And, it started out as a funny thought, but then it took quite a dark turn. When you see this film, you know what I mean. But I was super intrigued by this sort of like Truman Show kind of aspect to it. But when I started writing the script, there are so many, like, even though it started out as a joke, like, there are so many deeper themes to it, like what makes us human, what is free will, like, because I think in a way I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know if I believe in free will because it's so complicated. And I do think that in a way we are all programmed, like by our upbringing and the people we meet, the country where we were born in. So all those questions sort of seeps in that script. And it was a really fun challenge to sort of maintain a focus in that way, because I really love the fact when a short film especially is super focused and there is no noise and stuff like that. So that was a really great challenge.
And you shot on 35? So did you ever think, oh, this will make a great feature film at some point, or no?
Well, actually, I'm working on a feature film, because when we finished the short, like we made it as a short, and it's 22 minutes for a reason. But when I finished the short, I was like, oh, but I'm not finished, and I'm with the characters and the universe and this whole world. Um, so yeah, now that I shot on film, I'm spoiled. Like, it's so gorgeous. And I think shooting on 35, like shooting on film, really tied into the to one of the themes of this film, like the question what makes us human, and that's human approach. Because going back to that craft of shooting on film, that's the human approach. And it was funny because when I saw the monitor image for the first time, they told me before, like, it's not what you're used to, when you shoot digitally. And I was like, oh, but I can't see any details. Like, I was really shocked by that because I'm usually so much on the details.
So that was a bit shocking, but you know, you start to love it, and you start to love the process of like the focus that's on set when you shoot on film. Like that focus and concentration is really magical, and you know, I love to work, you know, in that way.
It's great. And talk to us about Trent, your producer, who's here today, by the way. A round of applause for Trent. Tell us about, had you worked with him before on anything? And tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we made two other short films together. We met 8 years ago on Valentine's Day at the Berlinale in Berlin, and we started to work together and try to find a project together, and then we fell in love. Because you know, when you, it's not always the case, of course, with your producer, but when you luckily, but when you know, when you're talking about projects or what interests you in life, and you realize, oh, but we share the same sense of humor and the same kind of, we have a similar view on the world, like it's easy to fall in love. So we did, and we made 3 short films together now, and it's, you know, it's really fun to experience all of this crazy circus together, like being nominated. You know, we both being nominated is so much fun, and also very, like, he's my rock in all of this, because as an introvert it's quite a lot, you know. So that's a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm really happy that I found someone that I, you know, really resonate with on so many levels, and that we can make short films together. Like, that's the dream.
I think that's great.
Isn't that cool?
I think you should double date. Guys should go on a double date with Sue Teacher. Hey, last question for you. And there's probably no real answer because it changes so much, but are you concerned a little bit about AI and the writing process, the creative process?
I am, yeah. I have this sort of love and hate relationship with ChatGPT, because I am scared of it. And especially, like, you know, if I put too much in it, like, okay, will it's at some point, if someone else asks, oh, but can you write a Victoria Warmerdam film? And then, you know, it all, you know, that's really, really scary. But at the same time, I'm using, because I'm writing the feature in English language, which is obviously not my first language. And it's so, like, it's funny because I never ask ChatGPT like creative questions, but I do, like, sort of brainstorm about the English language and the translation I just did. So it is, you know, amazing that you can really dive into that, but at the same time it's super scary. Yeah.
Right. Do you guys all feel like that too? Yeah. I mean, it's, Diane, I imagine for you, it must just be like, what? You guys stay away. Yeah. Because it does change it, but it's good for certain things to fact check maybe, or, but I always check I don't trust Chat GPT. So Victoria, just one last question for you, which is, did the short help, like in terms of funding, to help take it to the next step? And might we see this in, like, what do you think, like a year, is like in a year?
A year is, you know, it goes by so fast. But I do think that this nomination will probably help it, you know. And I think making a short, you know, even though I didn't make it as a sort of trailer for a feature, I do think it really helps in sort of, you know, showcasing the tone of voice and you know, the proof of concept, really. So yeah, hopefully it will help.
Yeah, I would think so. Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, Smitri Mundra. I Am Ready Warden. Love that title. Whoop.
Sorry.
No, that's it. Hey, Diane, that's a mic drop. I just did that. Thank you. I did that. I just thought of that. All right. Okay, Smirti, tell us a little bit about I Am Ready Warden.
First of all, the title, I have to give credit to my executive producer, Sheila Nevins. She came up with that title, and couldn't imagine anything else at this point.
No, and before you go on, a shout out to Sheila Nevins, who is the queen and the king, the queen, the quintessential most amazing person in terms of the documentary field. And none of us really who love docs would enjoy them without her. She's been
Absolutely.
HBO for a million years, now at MTV Documentary Films.
been very lucky to work with Sheila now for the last 5 years.
By the way, Diane, it's called I Am Ready Warden, not I Am Ready Warren. I know you're excited. Diane's like, is this about me? Another one about me?
That'll be the next film.
That's the next one.
So I Am Ready Warden is ostensibly a film about capital punishment and the death penalty. And it came about as I was working on another project, a feature documentary that was also about a death row prisoner. But that film was a more kind of traditional innocence case, that was about exoneration and, with a bit of a racial justice lens to it. And that project ended up going away because the prisoner had a legal development in his case, and I kind of lost access. But I was still very captivated by this world. And actually, in a way, when I was making the feature film, it was interesting and fascinating, but it always felt like that form, when it's more of like a true crime, type of a format, it allows the audience to be voyeurs, and sort of play along in an unfolding mystery. But what I really, in the time that I spent researching, in that world, what I was more drawn to was making something that asked a very sort of potent question to the audience and was less about, did he or didn't he, and more about looking outward to the audience and saying, do we actually believe in forgiveness? And do we believe in the idea of redemption? And so I wanted to make a film that was not an innocence case, that was about somebody who had actually committed the crime that he was accused of. And that led me to initially an incredible journalist named Carrie Blakinger, who had covered Texas prisons for the Marshall Project for many years, and just wrote with such deep humanity about the men on death row. She is a Pulitzer finalist for an article she wrote about these elaborate Dungeons and Dragons games that the men on death row play because they spend all of their lives in these 10 by 10 isolated and solitary confinement in these 10 by 10 cells, but they create these worlds, alternate worlds and personalities and alternate histories almost for themselves through these Dungeons and Dragons games. And so Carrie and I started talking, and it really just started there. And she had written about John Henry Ramirez, who's the protagonist of I Am Ready Warden, in a couple of her articles. And so we were talking about John, and I went to go meet him with her, and was just completely struck by him, and the distance between who he was at 19 years old when he killed a man in a botched robbery and who he was at 37, 38 years old when I talked to him through plexiglass. And I just was struck by his sense of remorse and this unsettled feeling within him that he spoke about never feeling like he never adequately communicated to his victim's family that he was deeply remorseful about what he did. And, sometimes those of us who make documentaries, sometimes I didn't know what the story was going to be when I first started out, but sometimes something captivates you. Like it's even sometimes just like the timbre in someone's voice, right, or the expression on their face, and you feel drawn into something. And that's how I felt when I met John. And then, when his date of execution was set, at the time when we first met, he actually was in a interesting sort of legal thing where his case had gone up to the Supreme Court over religious rights, because he had asked on his prior date of execution for his pastor to lay hands on him, and the state of Texas denied that request. So
just the laying of the hands?
Just the laying of the hands. Very sad.
Texas.
Yeah. So after, I'd met Carrie, we had started talking to John, and then in early 2022, the state of Texas set his date of execution. And so that's when we kind of started the process of making the film. Around that time, I had reached out also to everyone in the Castro family. So the person John killed is a man named Pablo Castro, and his family, most of his family lived in Corpus Christi, Texas. So I reached out to his family and just said, I'm making this film. I would love to talk to you. I invite your participation. I want to know your perspective. And the only person from the family that responded to me was Pablo's son, Aaron Castro, who was 14 when his father was killed, and who was in his early 30s when we first spoke. And Aaron initially said, you know, I'm not going to participate in your film. I have no interest in participating in your film. But if you're going to make a film about the man who killed my father, you need to know who my father was, and you need to know the impact of that event, the impact that it's caused in the lives of myself and my family. So we talked that first time, for hours on the phone, and then we started talking twice a week, every week for hours. And all the while, for months, he was like, I'm not comfortable like being on camera. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to be in your film. But I could tell he needed to talk, and he needed to talk to somebody who would give him the space to really sort out a lot of conflicting feelings that he had about what was happening. And over that time, we became good friends. And then finally, it was a week before John's execution that he finally said, "Okay, I want to be a part of the story, and I can be a part of the story."
And in the film, there's this moment where you just like see it, where like something shifts. Because before he was a little bit, like, screw him and angry and eye for an eye. And then you just see this shift. Was that remarkable when he suddenly like breaks down?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the most intense verite moments I've ever captured in anything that I've done. I was obviously, it was sort of a remarkable thing as it was unfolding, in the moment. But in hindsight, I can say I wasn't completely surprised because from the very first conversation we had, there was this tension within him between this sort of refrain, that he kept in his mind, that he kept repeating over and over again. You killed my father, you deserve to die. You've taken a life, yours is on the line. You hear that again and again in the film as well. And that's the refrain that he's had in his mind since he was 14 years old. But so there was a tension between that this sort of like drive for justice and this belief, this like real belief that execution was going to give him closure. And who Aaron really was as a person that I learned, which is somebody who felt deeply uncomfortable with the idea of another life lost in his name. So in hindsight, I can say that it tracks the reaction that when he heard those words, John Henry Ramirez is dead, for the first time, the reaction he has and the grief that pours out of him in hearing that, I think was a reflection of something that was inside of him since he was a little boy.
Yeah. But just grief for the situation, grief for another life, grief for the loss of his childhood, because 14 is a terrible thing. And then John Henry Ramirez had a son who was 16. His name was Izzy. And there's also a great part in the short where you see his last phone call. How did you get them to do that, or was it John's idea?
It wasn't, anybody's idea per se. So it was a very intense week that week. We filmed over, several months, but the majority of our filming was in this week to 10 days before and after the John's execution. And in that time, we had gotten to know some people who, the few people who were very close with him still. So Jan Trujillo, who's his godmother, became his godmother while he was in prison. We spent a lot of time with her, and she was sort of the keeper of all, because John had 3 dates of execution, and every time you have a date of execution in Texas, you have to clear out your cell, all of your belongings, and someone has 48 hours to come collect them, otherwise they get thrown away. And Jan dutifully, every time John had an execution date, would go to the prison, collect all his belongings, keep all of his letters, everything. So she had this incredible archive of basically his life. And Jan often would communicate messages and things like that between John and Israel, because it was difficult geographically because of where Izzy lived for him to visit a lot. So Israel wanted to come and be near, as close. He couldn't be in the witness chamber because he was a minor, but he wanted to sort of be near the premises, for the execution date. So Jan was the one who was tasked to bring him there. And so we met Israel through Jan, and we met his mother, Israel's mother, as well, and talked a bit about. We spent a day and a half, 2 days with them, just sort of talking about what we were doing, the film we were making, just getting to know them as people, and just Izzy is a 16-year-old boy, and he was interested in comic books, and he was fascinated by the cameras, and so we just spent, a couple of days with him, particularly our cinematographer Raphael Roy, like just spent time with him and showed him how the camera works. And they talked about we went out and to a comic book store together and just tried to get him to know us as people. And then on that day, the execution day, we had two camera teams. So Raphael and my producer Maya Ganep was with Israel, and I was with our other cinematographer Ian Mubayed with Aaron. And because Izzy was so comfortable, and he was alone in this hotel room because Jan was there witnessing, he was by himself. So he wanted Maya and Raphael, he wanted our team to be with him, and be near him. And when he got that phone call, he's a 16-year-old boy, and there's a lot of complicated emotions. And throughout, up until that moment, he'd really been trying to hold it together and be strong, And when that phone call happened and that tear fell, and you hear John on the other end of the phone choking up, talking about, he can leave this world knowing that his son is going to be okay. I mean, it was
Amazing.
devastating.
And then tell us, if you could, where you just came back from and how this little film has a life of its own.
So yesterday I had one of the most profound experiences of my entire life, something I'll never forget. We were able to screen the film thanks to Carrie and her connections with the prison system. We were able to screen the film at San Quentin State Prison for an audience of about 100 plus people, most of whom were residents of San Quentin, in other words, prisoners. It was, the response was astonishing. There were so many tears, and it felt like a collective grieving session. There were so many emotions were brought up for that particular audience in seeing the film. And the audience included actually a few men who were on death row. One of whom had been on death row for 38 years. And had a lot of parallels with John. And, he had killed someone. He was an angry young man. He had killed someone when he was 19. He also came within 6 days of his own execution before it was stayed. And it was just to you always hope, that your work will have an impact. But to be able to present the work in that environment and have those men talk about how they felt seen in a way that they had never felt seen before, and understood, and in a way by proxy of seeing Aaron forgive. I'm sorry, I'm giving away the ending, but eventually Aaron in the film decides to forgive John. And to see Aaron forgive John, it felt like that was possible for them. That because a lot of these men, they live with the regret and the remorse of their crimes, and they don't have that ability to see that maybe that possibility of forgiveness and redemption is possible for them. So for them to see that was really moving, and it was just incredible experience.
That's incredible. Wow. Quite a story. You never know at these women's panels. You just have these remarkable stories, and it just is. And Emily, you must really relate to what what she was saying because it's a little bit similar in terms
Yeah,
of
it
what you went
was.
through.
And I actually worked at the Marshall Project. I ran visual journalism there for years and so know Carrie very well and worked in prisons for many years. And the feeling was very similar. And, you know, I think people seeing themselves on the screen means something for indigenous people, for example. You know, at the same time that these schools were trying to eliminate them, Hollywood was portraying indigenous people as dying at the end of barrels of guns in westerns, right?
Right.
And talk about representation in Hollywood. Julian, my directing partner, is the first ever Indigenous North American filmmaker to ever be nominated for an Oscar in its 97-year history. Yeah, so representation matters.
That's quite remarkable. All right, Sutitra, we're gonna now the next part of this. We're just gonna do some fun questions and just conversational things about life in general. So one thing that I thought would be interesting for you is if you have since this is kind of a new thing, is there a piece of advice for someone getting into this that you learned hard and that you could help someone on it who's wants to follow in your footsteps? Maybe a mistake you made.
Yeah. Well, we are novices, so I don't know how valuable our advice is at this point in time, but I think, you know,
Well, let me ask you
I'm
this.
thinking,
No, I'm with you because,
Yeah.
and I specifically chose you for this because you're first time and it's also new. Sometimes you don't know what you can't do. You know, Paula, you've been in this game for a long time, and you think back about some of your process along the way. And why don't we ask Paula, since she's been doing this quite some time, for a piece of advice for someone getting into this, a mistake to help them avoid.
I believe, and I say this to anybody, that this is my seventh first time director that I've mentored in a documentary. And I love that. I love helping people find their voice and their story. For me, on this film in particular, with Porcelain War, is that trust the story. Like, make sure you're really passionate and you have something you can really contribute and add to that, and go all in, because these take a long time. This film, especially, we still don't have distribution. We have Picture House that did theatrical. We still don't have distribution, even after Sundance. So we're doing it, we're carrying it, and we're pushing it along. To be at this place is amazing.
You have pushed it every little step of the way.
Carried it, and you have to really want to be a part of telling that story. So my advice is to make sure that it's something that you really want to spend 4 or 5 years of your life with, and everything. Like, you have to be all in. And it's such an honor when the right story finds you, and you're in the right place, and you're doing the right thing. Believe in it. Don't give up. Be innovative. Right now, we've had an experience traveling with the film where people feel, I'm not making emotions on you, but people share that they feel pretty deflated, overwhelmed with what's going on in the world right now and in our country. And what they ask me all the time, what advice do you have? And I'm like, these people are ordinary people. They're artists. They make porcelain figurines. They were learning how to defend themselves and protect culture and art and the freedom to create. Those are things that we have, and we can never feel deflated. We have to continue to pick up and move forward.
That's right.
And don't give up and create. And we need brave storytelling. We need music. We need brave art. We need brave storytelling. Don't give up. More than ever, there's innovative ways to do it, and we just need to keep telling these stories. They're needed, and we'll find new ways to share them.
That's right.
Oh, I was just, in terms of advice of what to do, that is a kind of different question. And I think for the last 3 years, this has been a passion project for my husband and I, while doing our other jobs, as many of us do. And, again, I would echo your sentiments about passion, about, especially coming at it from, again, different, kind of different trajectories. It is a learning experience. It was a total learning experience. And day to day, we were learning things. Right now, we're learning things about the Oscars, and it's a totally different world. But I think that the trust that you mentioned and the desire to make art has been with us always. And this story, and again, it's an extension of both of our, careers and lives.
But I think it was great what Paula said. Find something that you love because you're going to be working on it for the next few years, right?
Exactly,
Which you did.
exactly. Who knew a short could take 3 years?
That's right.
Not so short. But, all the research, all the, attention to every detail, the music, the everything, building the characters, all of it, it's just been, yeah, it's art. Art does matter. And I think that, like you said, in this time, that's what we have. And sometimes I feel guilty. We're sitting here, Oscar nominated, and, there's all this,
Going
terror going on, and but it I tell myself, and we talk about it all the time, but it's art that carries us. It's art that heals us, and we need it.
That's right.
We need it
More than ever. All right, Emily. Let's say money was no object. Okay. I
Are
know.
we going
And
shopping?
no.
Oh.
Well, you could go shopping on the way. But let's say you could make your next film or doc or whatever on any subject. What would you want?
So, my great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, was murdered in a pogrom in Russia. And then his son avenged his death with revenge killing. And after spending the last 4 years,
Did you just
telling
clap
this-
for that, Diane?
Sorry.
Well, no, it's interesting.
My mom's
Yeah.
family came from Russia to
It's
escape the pogroms
interesting.
too.
It is.
So, sorry.
I think that the making sugarcane with Julian has inspired me to want to look deeper into my own identity, into my own family story, and I would love to make a fiction film, which would give me the opportunity as a journalist to dig into that story and to grapple with familial trauma and historic legacy, and again what we do when we're faced with violence. So that or Wicked.
Or Wicked? You want to do Wicked 3? That's next?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take that on.
All right. Victoria, is there someone that you can look back on that might have been the best boss you ever had, and why?
I had some not so good bosses. And it's funny because I'm always confused because I work with my partner. I'm like, yeah, he's the producer. He's technically my boss. But, I feel so equal.
Right.
But he is, and of course I'm biased, but he is the best boss because he really trusts, and, not only, according to myself, but he really trusts his directors, and he really, he's a big support, and he really sticks up for his filmmakers, and that's something I really admire. Yeah.
That's a great quality. And by the way, we can learn from our worst bosses too. Sometimes they're the best teachers.
That's true.
Smitri, I have to ask, you went from Indian matchmaking, Jewish matchmaking, Muslim matchmaking into this, which is, so my question is, all great shows. Yeah, and a new one was just picked up on Hulu. So, but you did kind of a little pivot to the I Am Ready Warden. What about you? If you could do what's next, or you could do anything, what would it be?
Oh man, this is the first time in maybe the last 5 years that after, this next few weeks. It's the first time I don't have anything in production. I don't have anything in post-production.
Wow.
I have nothing, and that's by design because I've been working a lot, the last half a decade, and it's been amazing and wonderful, but I need some space to like let the muse find me again. So I'm really looking forward to just, watching things and reading and going to museums and, ruminating on what I want to do next. But in a more abstract sense, my dream would be to do a super longitudinal documentary, something that I film over 20, maybe 30 years. I don't know about what necessarily. I have like some ideas, but I want to do something that just where you see time unfold, over like, decades. But in fiction, it's funny, like I met somebody yesterday and he just, it's like that we were talking about, and an idea came to me that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and it has to do with technology and mortality and
Really?
yeah. So
I have a
don't know.
feeling it won't take much time at all for you to figure out your next project. There's not going to be much downtime. And then Diane, last question for you. We'll wrap it up, which is you've written so many top songs. It's just in your DNA. It comes so naturally to you. But when you look back on your career, was there one song that just stands out that was really unusual that we talked about that was like just came together just magically, other than The Journey?
I mean, yeah, that is definitely one that did that. I don't know, because my rearview mirror doesn't really work. 'Cause I'm always on to the next thing. So one song that came easy or one song that shocked me, because whenever they
Shocked you.
work, they shock me.
Shocked.
'Cause they're-
Yeah. You know what made me think of this question? If you haven't seen it, Diane did a medley of all her like top songs, and it was so beautiful. I saw it on
Hollywood
YouTube.
Reporter, thank you.
Every one of them.
If you want to hear them sung really badly and
It's just-
long to hear the artist sing them, watch it.
It's incredible.
I sound horrible. It was really hard to. There was a lot of songs that I had to kind of shift keys and figure out what I was doing, and then.
But it was great. So I just thought
Thank
there
you.
might be one song that stands out that you're just like,
And that's 16.
yeah.
Okay, for different reasons. Journey being one, of course. Because You Loved Me was one
Yeah.
of them. One of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
A song I wrote for a movie called Up Close and Personal, but I got to thank my dad for believing in me. A song called there's so many for different reasons. There You'll Be from Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite songs I ever wrote, and that was the last song my mom ever heard of mine.
Because in a way, it's true. Each and every one of you are great storytellers. And whatever way we get there, we're working something out or telling a story. And I'm just so happy. And
that's the cool
happy
thing
for success.
Thank you. But that's the cool thing about songs, because they can be written for a movie, but then they have they have all these lives outside of that movie, and these songs did.
Well,
You know,
and the other
I mean,
thing-
people are getting married to Because You Loved Me, but it's ED.
Oh,
That's like one of the biggest wedding songs. I always like that. That's an interesting wedding song, but yeah, I love it. But it's
That's
ED,
pretty
it's past
funny.
tense, but yeah.
But I was just going to say, because people take it on and they think you wrote it for them and it's their story.
Yeah.
And so they appropriate it. So,
Yeah, the journey really that's taken on a life of its own too, because we're all on our own journey.
well, before we wrap it up, we have a special last treat for you. And that is that you're now going to see a clip from each and every woman up here and their great piece of work. And now that you've heard the backstory, when you see this footage, I think it's going to resonate in a very deep way with you. And so thank you all. Amazing. Thank all of our panelists today. Thank you all so much for coming, and I wish all of you luck at the Oscars.
Thank you so much.